Meeting to order. The clerk will take the roll.
Mayor Wolcott.
Here.
Vice Mayor Williams.
Here.
Councilmember Biendo.
Here.
Councilmember Villanueva.
Here.
Councilmember Alton.
Here.
Councilmember Woodard.
Here.
Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Thank you.
Would everyone please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Hillman, you have a report this evening?
Nothing to report, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Attorney, do you have anything to report this evening?
Mayor and Council, I do not. However, if you'll notice on the agenda, there is an executive session item so that I can provide an update with regards to litigation matters, and I'll be asking to do that later in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The regular City Council meeting agenda includes one consent agenda item. Is there any need to discuss this, or do I hear a motion?
Move to approve consent.
There's been a motion made and seconded to approve item number 1 on the consent agenda. The clerk will take the roll.
Woodard, need your vote, please.
Mr. Woodard.
Mike. Sorry.
Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Thank you. The next item is item 2. The clerk would read the item, please.
Yes, that's consideration and action on a resolution 2012-09, a resolution establishing the General Plan Advisory Committee.
This item is being brought forward to us by Councilman Biendo and Alton, who have been working very hard on putting together some recommendations before us. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Biendo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Over the past 2 weeks, Councilmember Alton, Councilmember Hall, and I interviewed applicants to serve on the General Plan Advisory Committee. First, we want to express appreciation to all those who expressed an interest in serving. There were 25 applicants, all of whom we interviewed. The number of applicants, I think, is indicative of the high level of interest that citizens have in serving the City of Surprise. Our prime consideration as we went through the interviews was to identify those within the applicant pool who are representative of the city geographically, experientially, and by age and by gender, who could bring diverse perspectives to the table during the discussions, and also who would be willing to devote the time and energy necessary to this important task. Before introducing the candidates, we've asked Mr. Mihalik to give a very brief overview of the role and purpose of the General Plan Committee, and then following that, Councilmember Alton and Councilmember Hall will introduce the people we are recommending in alphabetical order. So, Mr. Mihalik.
Madam Chair, members of City Council, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Just a quick overview of the general plan and then the role of the committee itself. The general plan, as you know, is a critical piece of land use guidelines for the City of Surprise. It creates really the guidelines for the physical growth and development of the City of Surprise. It sets a framework for specific projects and establishes goals and policies, not for this year or next year, but for the next 20 years. You can see how impactful this document is. And it's an opportunity for all of us to create and enhance the quality of life in the City of Surprise. Why is the general plan important? People ask that a lot because it expresses the community's vision, and that's one reason why this committee is so important, because they need to reach out to the community, reach out to the neighborhoods, and help identify and establish that vision and share that with City Council for their concurrence. It also identifies the community's goals and development priorities. Are we a high-growth community, slow-growth community? Do we want to do a little bit of both? And those policies are part of that document itself, and establishes a framework to support future CIP projects. We just talked about that in the work session. The really goal of the CIP should really start at the general plan level and work its way through. And it's also a tool for education and communication to our residents. Our residents are constantly asking, how are we going to grow in the future? And this document provides that. Here's a very quick look at the timeline. We are in that process already. We're doing public outreach. We hope that the GPAC committee will start meeting in May. Public comment through the summer, fall, and into the winter. adopt the plan at the council level, let me stress again, at the council level, next January, July of 2013, and then it will go to the voters for ratification. The role and responsibility of the GPAC is to provide important advice and oversight of the process itself. And as you mentioned, Councilman, it's a very long process to review and recommend goals and policies, to act as general plan ambassadors in their neighborhoods, another outreach component, to provide feedback and recommendations, and clearly it's a key role in the public outreach efforts. So with that in mind, it's clearly Adonius that we provide a general plan advisory committee, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mihalik. Now, Councilmember Alton, would you like to introduce the first 6, and then Councilmember Hall, if you'll introduce the last 6?
It is my privilege to introduce these 6. Okay, and because we're going alphabetical, because of my last name, Alton, I'm first. Okay? And as we introduce people, I like to have you stand up and possibly come up forward and just kind of stand by the podium. Robert Adams. Robert has a Bachelor's of Science degree from the U.S. Naval Academy, an MBA in Marketing and Finance from the University of Southern California, and has had a distinguished career in the U.S. Navy. From 2004 to 2006, he worked closely with Luke Air Force Base as a government account officer. Most recently, he served as a U.S. liaison to the European Union Naval Headquarters in London. Thank you very much, Robert. Next is Daisy Anderson. I don't know if Daisy's here today.
Daisy was not able to be here tonight.
Daisy is a full-time realtor in Surprise. She owns a home in Desert Oasis and has been an active member of the Villages Committee. Next is Daniela Cortez. Is she here? Daniela is a human resources manager at Rio Glass Solar. She has an MBA from ASU, has a vested interest in our community, and envisions the future of the city as a family place. Frank Diaz, I know you're here. Come on down. Frank Diaz has had a long career in business as a store manager for JCPenney & Company. He also has 25 years experience in the leadership roles with a nonprofit organization and currently serves as the chairman of the Civic Affairs Committee with the Surprise Regional Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Frank. Anthony Gunderson. Anthony has lived in Surprise since 1988 and has been project manager at Home Depot. He brings the perspective of a young resident with small children and has a vision for Surprise as a place where young families can have employment opportunities, a safe community, and educational opportunities. He currently works with senior residents in the Sun City West area. Melissa Holdaway. Melissa is a co-founder and chief operating officer of Arizona Charter Academy. From 2010 to the present, she also has served as a commissioner on the Arizona Commission for Post-Secondary Education. Through the Academy, she works closely with a number of children and families in the original town site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Alton and Councilman Biendo. I, too, am very honored to introduce the following 6 people. Andy Jokums. Andy was a planner with the City of Surprise from 2002 to 2005 and participated in the village planning groups. He has experience as a professional planner in both public and private sectors and has worked closely with area developers. Mike Kramer. Mike is an engineer with a civil, architectural, and structural background. He previously was in partnership with a professional planner and now continues in business as a civil architectural engineer. He has lived in Mountain Vista Ranch for 2 years. Leo Mankowitz. Leo has experience working in the federal and state trial courts. He has particular skills in organizational discourse. Jack McSweeney. There's Jack. Jack is the Director of Architecture for an area home builder and focuses primarily on product design. He was a planning manager for the Verrado community. Jack sees the general plan as an inspirational drive for the community. Mitchell Rosenbaum. Mitchell here? Mitchell has degrees in political science and educational administration and was an employee of the Dysart School District from 1974 to 1999. His grandfather moved to Surprise in 1952, and Mitchell has watched the city grow from a white spot on Grand Avenue to a city of over 117,000. He also has a background in real estate. Claro Salvo. Claro has a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering. He retired recently after having served as a senior engineer with the Bechdel Corporation in Houston, Texas. So this is a fine group of people. We're very proud to have them.
Thank you. Just quickly on the screen, Mr. Mihalik has put up a map that will show the geographical distribution of the 12 people. So we have, we think, some good representation both north and south as well as east and west. So geographical distribution was a prime consideration. Madam Chair, Councilmember Alton, Councilmember Hall, and I unanimously recommend the appointment of these 12 citizens to the General Plan Advisory Committee.
Thank you very much. And I want to say how much I appreciate all of you for applying for this position. It's so very important to the future of our city. And I really want to thank all of the 25 people who applied for this position, because those of us who've been involved in interviewing candidates for appointments on council boards and commissions have noticed an increased interest in our community. And we can't tell you how much that means to us. It's really, really exciting to see. And I also want to thank you, Councilman Biondo, Alton, and Hall, for your work in putting together this incredible committee recommendation. I think you've done a marvelous job. You've done exactly what you were asked to do, and I think it's in the best interest of this community. And so I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 2012-09.
Second.
There's been a motion made and seconded to approve the selection of this slate of candidates for the General Plan Advisory Committee. Councilman, or Mr. Bailey, is this an appropriate time to ask for any comments from the audience? Is there anyone from the audience who would like to make comment about the selection of these fine candidates? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you so much. And hang on.
I'd like to get a picture of you right here in the well of the chambers, please. Probably 2 rows, talls in the back. Not so talls in the front, please.
In the back.
Yeah, he's a tall one. He's a tall one. It's a good group. Yep.
Thank you, guys.
You betcha.
Remember, if you can't see the camera, I can't see you, so make sure your full head is looking into the lens. Everybody's got a clear view of the camera. I'll take a few. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're getting to it right now.
That moment when I asked for comments from the audience, you were acting like as if anyone, like a wedding.
My phone's on my hand.
All right, thank you all for participating. The next item, please.
Consideration and action on Resolution 2012-36. This is authorizing the city to submit an application to the City of Phoenix for the Job Access Reverse Commute 5316 Federal Transit Authority grant funding for fiscal year 2012.
Ms. Gaskins, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Council. I'm delighted to present to you the Job Access Reverse Commute Grant, otherwise known as 5316. And I'm particularly excited about this project because of all the collaborative efforts that took place to make it happen. Internally, the Public Works Department worked very closely with the City Manager's Office, and externally, this Public Works Department spearheaded agreements with the City of Surprise, El Mirage, Phoenix, and RPTA. So tonight, I am requesting that City Council allow the City Manager to submit a grant application in the amount of $570,000 for a 3-year time period. This funding will be used to not only continue the current express route services for 571, but it will also enhance those services by adding 2 additional trips. I'd like to point out some important project details and just kind of run through them so that you can understand a little more about the project. The City of Surprise has been paying for this service over the last 4 years, and that amount is about $280,000 per year coming from the general fund. The bus basically travels from the City of Surprise and El Mirage and goes right down to the City of Phoenix. It's primarily used by the working poor and for people that are headed to work and for the minorities. The ridership has increased over the last few years. From 2009 to 2010, it increased by 6%, and then again another 5% between 2010 and 2011, and it's estimated to increase by 10% for fiscal year 2011-2012. You should also know that JARC funding is for work-related transportation, and it has the potential to save operating costs by 50%. It should be noted that Valley Metro, Phoenix, El Mirage, and Surprise, and RPTA, they all support this project, and they have committed to this with letters of support. They all want to realize cost savings. And in the event that funding is compromised or the grant isn't fully funded, the city has options to use LTAP 2 funding, or they can even reduce the additional trips, or even request extra funds from the partnering agencies. And last but not least, as I mentioned before, this is not just the continuation of current services, but it is also the expansion of services. So let's talk about some money matters. Generally speaking, the cost of the project is $280,000. If we add on the 2 trips, that would add an additional $100,000, making the total project cost $380,000. If we apply for the grant and we get full funding, it would cut that cost in half, making the city's out-of-pocket cost $190,000 per year. This is an immediate savings of $90,000 from what we currently pay for. And now I'd like to highlight the options related to the grant. So if the city does nothing, they will continue to pay $280,000 and service will stay the same. If the city applies for the grant, it has the potential to cut costs in half, making it $190,000 from the general plan, and just as I mentioned before, $90,000 savings. This last option came about from the presentation that was before City Council last week. RPTA came before you and they discussed something called PTF funding for the express route, and they threw out a number of $136 in savings. If the grant is paired with that PTF funding, it would look a little different than $136,000. It would break out into percentages. So the City of Surprise's proportionate share would be 51%, Phoenix would be 27%, and El Mirage would be 22%. That would make the city's out-of-pocket cost $96,900. Total cost, woohoo! Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And so the timing for this project is on April 26th, Public Works and I will go before the City of Phoenix, who actually administers the grant, and we will defend this project based on what your input is today. And funding will not be released until early to mid-2013, allowing us to start this program on July 1, 2013. This will give us enough time to market it as well as change the route books so that we can add in the 2 trips.
Perfect.
And with that, I'll take questions.
Anyone wish to start? Oh, Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. Janine, good job.
Thank
Question,
you.
if you can go back like about 3 slides. Back. Okay. Second. That second bullet there. Additional routes cost $100,000. Right. Currently, we got the 571 route has 3 buses, goes down 3 different times,
Comes
and then back 3 different times. Right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What's additional?
The additional would be 2 extra trips, so 1 coming in and 1
4 down.
Yes, sir.
4 back.
And we still save money.
Wow. Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And additionally, ridership has increased, and we have 2 spots. The last trip in and the first trip out are almost at capacity, 96% based on the presentation that came before you last week, and then the other one is 85%. So we want to somehow make sure that we time those extra trips to alleviate that congestion.
Gotcha. Thank you, Janine.
Councilman Alton.
Yes, thank you. Janine, will these numbers hold up once the gas prices go down? Will the ridership hold, do you think? Or is it commensurate with the high gas prices?
Madam Chair, Councilman Alton, the price has been increased somewhat. The general cost for the trip is around about, we say $280, and it could be around about $272. Public Works Department recently worked with RPTA to kind of finite those numbers, and they came up with $272. But with respect to your question, we wanted to add in just a little bit just in case there was the possibility of increased gas prices. It should be also noted that the fare price is going to increase, and that would bring down our costs. So we wanted to make sure that we pushed that in there just to make sure that we were covering all the costs. You had another question with regards to ridership. We're putting this grant in for 3 years just so that we can make sure we don't lose support from our residents. However, every year we have the opportunity to reevaluate the route. So we'll look at those numbers again, and perhaps it's just we need 1 trip in, and then we would only ask for half of the total cost if it goes up or if it goes down.
So, and we also know the biggest time frames that we have the biggest impact.
Yes, sir.
Correct? Do you anticipate another bus route going at the same time or slightly before or after the route has the biggest impact?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Alton, we're going to let our PTA negotiate the exact time that would best meet our needs. As I mentioned before, the last trip in is the one that's mostly congested. The load is about 96%. And then the first trip back, that one's about 85%. And so somewhere in between that time, they'll put a bus route in between those 2 times to make sure that we mitigate the congestion.
And do you have any feel for what it's going to cost on a fare box increase to the residents of Surprise?
No, sir, I don't know that, but I believe that Public Works does have that new figure.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Biondo. Oh, excuse me, I apologize. Councilman Villanueva.
Yeah. You answered
Have you figured out the route?
to go through with El Mirage and that sort of thing.
Madam Chair, Councilman Villanueva, yes, the Public Works Department has been working diligently with our PTA to make sure that they have the right locations for those routes. As it stands right now, the first route is in our park and ride station, and there will be another one that will be in El Mirage, and then the new stop, or depending on the new time, it'll be the same stops, but the new time will dictate how long that ride is. The ride is around about an hour and 20 minutes now, so we want to make sure that we're conscientiously thinking about where we place the routes.
Thank you.
Councilman Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Janine. Just to kind of disclaim any myths, I was at an HOA meeting and someone was discussing, concerned with our reducing these routes, and we haven't had those discussions ever, and I wouldn't foresee us reducing any of these routes because of the significant demand. And in fact, we need to continue to provide more of these routes. And as these are provided, more people, I believe, my own very amateur perspective is that more people will ride and will take that opportunity. And we hear through conversations with folks that are working in Phoenix and firefighters in Phoenix and those sort of, if I had the opportunity, I would. And what this will do is we'll set the table for really establishing a need for commuter rail. And I think we need to continue to look to expand these routes. And I commend you on going after this grant, and I fully support it.
Thank you. I must say that it was really a collective effort between Public Works and the other staff members. It was amazing. We took out eraser boards to make sure that we could understand this complicated transit process, and hats off to all of them for all their efforts.
Good.
Councilman Biondo.
I appreciate your putting that funding timeline in your presentation so that we know the status at given points in time. Sometimes there are grants submitted and then we're not quite sure what the steps are in the process of approval or non-approval. So I appreciate the funding timeline. Thank you.
Anyone else? I, too, want to thank you, Janine, for the work that you've done here, and also to our Department of Public Works for working so hard to put this together. Also, I think our InterGov, it was a team effort, and with our city manager as well. This fits within our goal to provide not just current levels of service, but better service and actually save money in the process. So it's a win-win for our budget and for our residents who need this service, and I couldn't be happier that we are moving forward with this very, very good opportunity for the city of Surprise. So with that, I am looking for some direction from the council.
Move to approve resolution number 2012-36.
Second.
There's been a motion made and seconded to approve ordinance -201236. 36. I'm sorry. The motion being made and seconded, is there any discussion from the audience? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Good job,
Thank you
Janine.
very, very much.
Thanks, Janine.
Next item.
This consideration and action on resolution 2012-37. This is a declaring its intention to create a lighting improvement district for the OTS Commercial North B123 Street Lighting Improvement District.
Madam Chair and members of the council, this item was brought forth at the last work session last week to announce the public notice for the smaller slid within the commercial north, specifically around the two hotels located off of Greasewood, right by the old city hall. I'll be happy to answer any questions. The intent is to post this, the notice in the next week, have the appropriate time, which I think is 20 to 21 days, and then bring it back in the first meeting in May to actually have the slid formed.
Are there any questions on this item?
Yes. This is the second time around for the street light. Do you think you have the votes?
We already have the petition signed
Okay.
to get the majority. This is the first time for this slid specifically. The larger commercial north did not secure the slid, so the lights were turned off. And the owners of the hotel came to the city and asked to form a smaller slid and facilitate the street lights in this area.
Okay. Thank you.
And I just want to make a comment. Nick, thanks much for taking the initiative on this and briefing me on it and the hotel owners, because we're trying to solve that problem over there because they were dark and there's some perception issues. There was no crime issues. We talked to Chief Mike Frazier about it, and he did an analysis. There was no increase in crime, but there was a perception issue. And I really appreciate you solving this for us, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nick.
Are there any further?
Excuse me.
Oh, Councilman
I'm
Hall.
sorry, I didn't. Nick, thank you very much. We have a lot of other issues regarding slids within our city, so please don't give up. Continue to look for ways in which to gather our businesses and our citizens together to create a safe environment in all districts, wherever they may be, that we don't have, a half a mile of no lights on on a major road. So if you could help us out and continue with that task, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, members of the council, Mr. Alton, I will continue as much as I can. ACM Mahalik always jokes about it when we're in development meetings. I'm the first one to raise the red flag and say slid.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. If you need support, let me know, and I'll come with
Definitely.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? If not, I'll seek an action.
Move to approve resolution number 2012-37.
Second.
There's been a motion made and seconded to approve resolution number 2012-37. Is there any commentary from the audience? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Thanks, Nick.
Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Thank you. Next item.
Consideration and action on ordinance 2012-01, an ordinance regulating pawn shops.
Welcome, Chief.
Good evening. Madam Chair, Vice Mayor, members of the council, we last appeared before you on the 17th of January at a work session discussing an ordinance that would regulate pawn shops, secondhand dealers, and scrap metal dealers. The reason we're not back before you until this evening is that state law requires, because there was a fee associated with this, you have to post it on our website for 60 days and allow people to comment. Because it's been so long, and we're asking you to adopt this ordinance tonight, I've asked Sergeant Tim Klarkowski, and let me also introduce Lieutenant Harold Brady, who's our legal advisor. Sergeant Klarkowski was then Detective Klarkowski, and he was the one that kind of authored this ordinance. And I should mention that nearly every other city that I know of has a pawn shop ordinance. And as Tim will probably talk about here very briefly, the importance to the police department is it really helps us, we believe, reduce the incidence of property crime, number one, and secondly, hopefully return the property that we recover back to its rightful owners. So with that, I'm going to ask Sergeant Klarkowski to go through a very brief presentation just to refresh everybody on the issue. Tim?
Thank you. Sergeant, welcome.
Thank you, ma'am. Madam Chairman, members of the council. Like I said, I'm going to do a quick overview of the ordinance, and then if there are any questions, I'll entertain those as well. There's a couple different goals that we have with the ordinance. Particularly, we want to deter the fencing of stolen property and to assist victims in recovering their property, and then also increase our prosecution rate and successful conviction rate for individuals who are stealing and fencing stolen property. The ordinance is going to require a couple of specific things. First, it's going to require that scrap metal dealers, pawn shops, and secondhand dealers are licensed. Part of the licensing process includes an application, fingerprinting, and a criminal background check, similar to the process that we already use for licensing in the city. Furthermore, the ordinance is going to require that businesses file a report for any transaction where they purchase $25 or more worth of goods from an individual, or any transaction they engage in which is a pawn transaction, which is already required by state law. Specifically, the reports will be filed electronically through a system called Leads Online, which we currently use for criminal information, reference pawn and secondhand dealing. The report will have to contain a sufficient description of the item so that detectives or investigators who are working the case can determine whether or not the item is in question. And the other thing that's important to note is that our system actually allows for one transaction to include up to 999 items. This is a bit of a contrast from what some of the other cities do, which they have anywhere from 3 to 5 items. And as we'll talk about coming up here, that becomes somewhat important when we start talking about transaction fees. We also included a number of exemptions within the ordinance, particularly nonprofit or religious organizations, sellers of agricultural produce, real estate sales, and businesses that sell exclusively secondhand books, magazines, records, or cassette tapes. We've also included an exemption for used clothing and footwear, and then any baby items which are listed here, which are bought for less than $150. Going back to the 999 items, this is why it's so important. The second part, which I believe is the resolution, item number 6, is going to establish a transaction fee. The idea behind the transaction fee is to help offset the cost associated with the purchase of the software and the system for leads online. What we've recommended is a $3 per transaction fee. To put it into perspective, we allow up to 999 items per transaction, whereas other cities only allow 3 to 5 items, and they charge anywhere from $3 to $3.50. So realistically, we're giving a lot more bang for the buck, if you will, including up to 999 items. The last part of the ordinance is that it's going to create a provision for police to be able to put a hold on items, which basically means that investigators can secure that item, make sure it's not sold or melted down, scrapped, anything like that. If we request the item be turned over to the police, then the business will have to comply with that. And it also does create a process that the business owners or operators can dispute the true ownership of the item, so that way they have some recourse. And with that said, I know I kind of went through it quickly. I'll answer any questions.
Any questions?
What were,
Councilman Hall.
what were the, did you get a lot of negative comments when you put it out there for comment?
Actually, sir, we didn't receive any comments at all from the public.
Wow, okay.
And I might add to that, that over the summer when they were building this, putting it together, we had 2 hearings and only had a handful of people attend, and they were really, they had a couple of questions, but nothing overly negative.
And also, if I may add to that as well, sir, prior to coming to council with this in January, we had worked with the Chamber of Commerce as well, and we made some changes to the ordinance to accommodate. So,
I was going to ask that. So you actually did, you had an opportunity to meet with some of the jewelers, for example, and kind of talk through their concerns and in sync with the Chamber of Commerce?
Yes, ma'am.
That's great. Okay. Any other questions? Councilman Woodard?
Yes. In scrap metal and stuff, like tin cans, if we take our aluminum cans in, well, after 99 of them, that's a new transaction because I'm just, where does it, how does that work?
Well, the scrap metal is what we're more focused on is the copper, the brass, things like that, which are high dollar items. We're not necessarily looking to count cans per se, if that makes sense. And I don't think state law actually accommodates the selling of aluminum cans. I think there's an exemption provided in there. This is not going to increase the strictness of that.
Okay, well, that was my question. I mean, how, because at some point it does get kind of ridiculous. We're after the copper, the brass, people that are ripping us off on those areas.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Then, seeing none, look for an action.
I move the adoption of Ordinance 2012-01, an ordinance regulating pawn shops, second-hand dealers, and scrap metal dealers.
Second.
There being motion made and seconded to adopt the Ordinance 2012-01, is there any commentary from the audience?
Can I ask a question?
Would you come forward to the microphone, please?
I've never been to your swap meet that you conduct here in the city, but will this affect the swap meet? Will the swap meeters have to get a license? Will they be under the jurisdiction of this ordinance? Thank you.
Harold, you know the answer? Yes. Okay.
Specifically, what we're looking for to address is not swap meets and things where it's private parties engaging in sales between themselves, which would be exactly what this gentleman was describing. We're looking for businesses which are taking these items in on a regular basis. So there would be no impact to swap meets or any garage sales, anything like that.
Thank you so much for answering that question. I appreciate that.
Good.
Any further questions? The clerk will take the roll.
Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Next item.
Consideration and action on Resolution 2012-05. There's a type error there. A resolution setting the transaction fee for specified transactions at $3 per transaction.
Sergeant, this is the second part.
Yes, Madam Chair. This is the second part of the ordinance, which specifically, I'll back up here, is establishing the transaction charge. As I had said before, what we were aiming for is a $3 per transaction charge, which would help to offset the cost of the Leads Online system. Again, that is very generous in comparison to some of our sister agencies throughout the valley, which charge either the same or more for a lot less items that can be included on there.
Okay. Any questions?
In the way I understand it, the software is about $4,400 just to track this, right? So that $3 fee goes back to liquidate that expense. Correct, Sergeant?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay.
Any other questions? I'll hear for an action.
Move to approve resolution number 2112-05, resolution of the City of Surprise, Maricopa County, Arizona, setting the transaction fee for specified transactions at $3 per transaction.
Second.
There being a motion made and seconded to approve resolution number 2012-05. Is there anyone else from the audience that wishes to discuss this item? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next item.
Consideration and action on Resolution 2012-50, a contract for professional services agreement with Red Oak Consulting for post-audit work relating to development agreement review.
Mr. McCarty.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the City Council. The issue tonight has to do with all of the post-audit work the city is getting ready to undertake. So if we could, there's really 4 agenda items, the next 4 that are related. And so the staff proposes we'll make one presentation, then circle back and ask council to take specific action on each one of the 4 items. On March 27th, the City Council approved the transparency plan to deal with the fiscal year 2011 audit. The 4 subsequent agenda items really get at how we're going to go about addressing those items. The first 2 are the contracts for the firms that are actually going to do the work. The third item relates to the temporary staffing that the city's going to hire in order to assist with that process. And then the 4th item addresses the work that needs to be done to be in compliance with the new impact fee laws, which really deals with a component of the post-audit work. So I am going to turn the presentation over to the 2 consultants. Pat Walker is to my immediate right with Red Oak Consulting, and Sandy Cronstrom is with Clifton Larson Allen, our auditor. So with that, I will pull up their presentation and then allow them to take you through the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Thank you. I'll be talking about the development agreement review and the performance audit that the consultant project team will be doing in the next 6 to 8 months is what the anticipated timeline is. The consultant project team is made up of team members of myself, Pat Walker, and I've teamed up with Red Oak Consulting with Andrew Ream and Rick Jardina. We've all worked together on impact fees in the state of Arizona for many, many years and have done development fee agreement reviews. And so we've come together as a team, and especially with Arizona and the experience with Surprise, the city of Surprise. In addition to our team, there's the Clifton Larson Allen, who is made up of a team member of 3, Sandy, Karen, and Carter, and they'll be talking about more of their role when I turn it over to Sandy. The main there's 4 project objectives we want to obtain going into this project. We want to identify any potential issues with development fee agreements. We want to look at the internal process review for both development and impact fees as well as building permit fees. We want to determine the financial requirements, which would mean the financial requirements not only maybe that you've had from the past, but what you're going to have in the future, both from the impact fee side and from the building permit fee side. And then any report and recommendations are going to come out of this. We're not going to leave without giving some recommendations on how you move forward. We know that's important to Mayor and Council is, okay, this is what we have, but what are we going to do to fix it? There's three main study areas. The development agreement review, which is what Red Oak will be tackling, the team of Red Oak. And right now, we know of 75 development agreements and 53 amendments to those development agreements. And I said that's what we know now. Part of our due diligence is to look and see if maybe there's some additional development agreements that maybe haven't been discovered yet, but those are the ones that we know of today. Quite a few development agreements to go through. We will then look at the development impact fee expenditure review, which is a separate study area. We're going to look at what has been expended in the past and what on development fees. And we did look at from 2007 through 2010 because the last study you did was adopted in 2007, but now we've been asked to go back further on that, back to fiscal year 99-2000 impact. Permit and process review, and again, this is what Clifton Larson Allen's going to be doing, and actually looking at the verification of what's been collected, what's been paid, what's been assessed, and what's been collected. So the project approach we're going to take is we're going to have an initial strategy meeting, and we're going to identify the project team. And it's not just the consultant project team. There's going to be quite a few members from the city that's going to be involved in this process all the way through. We're going to talk about the roles and responsibilities, and we want to make sure that we're doing this as efficiently as we possibly can so that we're not duplicating efforts, that we're working as a well-run machine as we get through this. We're going to look at the city permit and development impact fee process on how it's done in the permit department, and the technology for permit and financial systems. That's important too. There's the process of doing it and then how you use technology to do it. So the outcomes that we want to have is a fiscal year, to decide on the fiscal year start date. So far, what we understand is 99-2000, and we're going to look and see what type of records you have back to that financial era, and then because there's been some conversions since then. But that's what we're planning on at this time. Again, something that we're going to talk about in the initial planning strategy meeting. We're then going to talk about the collaboration of project team. Again, I think that's really important to do this as effectively and as efficiently as we possibly can as a team. Talk about the schedules on when we think we can complete this, who's doing what, when. The data requirements, there'll be an extensive list of data requirements that we're going to need to see, and then a communication plan, internal communication and an external, and then any outcomes to move forward and make things right moving forward, and process procedures. So the Red Oak team, what we're going to do is we're going to identify the information for each one of the development agreements. We're going to look at the facilities that were required within the development agreement. What was the city going to provide? What was the developer going to provide? The impact fee credits and reimbursements that were outlined in the agreement, and then the additional financial responsibilities that may be in there. There may be some other things as we're going through this other than impact fees that come up that may have some financial impact, and that's why we're going to be working with the city staff and the legal department and discussing those if they come about. Because once we do this, we have to reconcile it. We then have to say, okay, what was put into the development agreement and really what has been constructed and what's been dedicated. We're going to look at the development impact fee credits that have been redeemed and what's left to be redeemed. We're also going to look at the reimbursements as to what has been reimbursed. And again, that's why the Clifton Larson Allen team is going to have to work hand in hand with the Red Oak team, and that's why we're one project team. The other phase was I was talking about that we came to council before on was the expenditures prior to 2007, from 2007 to 2010, and now we're going back further. And in doing that, we have to look at the adopted fee schedules during that time period. We have to look at the state statute requirements that were there at those time periods, and then reconcile the differences between the study, what was in the study, and then what was expended. And with that, I'll turn it over to the Clifton Larson Allen team.
Ms.
Thank you.
Welcome.
As Pat mentioned, our role in this process is to look at the revenue side, the development impact fees themselves, how they were assessed, how they've been tracked, and how they've been collected. And what our initial plan in doing that is we feel that we're going to go down and do a walkthrough of the process, figure out how the building permits are assessed, and going back to 99-2000, of course, and it's going to be very dependent on the materials that are available to us. But also we're going to approach this very much like we do your audit, and we're going to be looking at the areas that we feel are more risky, which might be some of your commercial permits that were issued. And we're probably going to be doing a lot of sampling with the residential building permits. we always look at things from a materiality standpoint. We obviously can't recalculate every building permit that was issued during the last decade here. So we do want to rely on some of our statistical procedures that we can use to kind of hone in on the areas that we feel that some of the issues are. So that's kind of the approach we're going to take. We're going to be doing some sampling probably year by year, going through, and we're hoping that we can come to you periodically and tell you where we're at, this is what we're finding, and then get some direction from you on, do you want us to look further into this year? Are we satisfied with what we're finding, and kind of get some direction from you on where to go from there. Also, we're going to be looking at the collection of these fees. As we were doing the city's regular audit, we did find some issues where it appeared that the items were assessed and they were waived, and those items weren't properly accounted for between the impact fee funds and the general fund. So we want to follow those all the way through into the city's general ledger to make sure that everything that should have been collected is being put into the correct funds in your books. So that's really our role in this. As I said, we're going to be relying a lot on our sampling techniques to try to cut down on the amount of time that it's going to take to go through, obviously, volumes of information. Once we're through all that, where are we going to be? What is the city going to get out of this? To summarize, we look at this as another step towards your financial resiliency, something you've been talking about over the past several months. Pat's group is going to come together with a summary of the development agreements, and you will know what's outstanding, if we've recorded all the infrastructure and all the items that we need to that are related to those agreements. We're also going to determine the financial impact of all the areas that we've reviewed to make sure that once and for all that the expenditures are in the proper funds and the revenues have been properly allocated, and then we will come back and probably propose some adjustments. We're pretty sure there will be some adjustments between the funds based on this work. And then lastly, we'll be providing you a report and some recommendations on how we feel these processes could be improved. With that, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions, council members? Any questions? None. I will hear an action. Thank you for your presentation. Looking for an action.
Excuse me, Mayor. I'm sorry, Mayor, may I ask a question? Bob Vukanovich wanted to speak on all of these 4 items. I'm not sure how you want to handle that.
I'll take an action, a motion first, and then once we've had the motion on the floor, then we'll ask for his input.
I move to approve the contract with Red Oak Consulting for post-audit work relating to development agreement review and Resolution 2012-50, amending the fiscal year 2012 budget.
Second.
Being a motion made and seconded to approve Resolution 2012-50, and there are no questions from council at this time. Mr. Vukanovich, would you like to come forward?
Transparency and involvement, I love it. I think this should be brought up. First of all, I'd like to thank my councilman, Mike Woodward, for answering some of my questions. He was kind enough to give me some answers. You know, when you first look at these items, and a lot of times we don't look at all these items with the magnifying glass. So when I started looking here, I assumed when it says on the surface, it appears that the Risk Management Fund will fund this work. Well, when you start looking underneath there, that's not so. Financial impact statement. This contract was not included in the 2012 budget, and this post-audit work will be funded by the Risk Management Fund in an amount of $150,000 as detailed in Exhibit A. But if you go to the bottom of Resolution 2012-50, Exhibit A, they take out, this is new. This year you have a new fund. You have a grants and a fund and a contingency fund. We never had this before. This is the first time that you've put this year. And you take out of the contingency $150,000, and you put it in risk management, contractual services, $150,000. So we had a contingency fund, where we took $150,000 out of there. I asked about the contingency fund. I'm told we don't have a contingency fund. Other people tell me you're referring to a contingency fund, as if I'm not what I'm referring to. And you have a grant and a contingency fund. How much money is in there? I can tell you. It tells you how much is in there. You adopted in the 2012 budget. You adopted $68,387,300. Includes $17 million for estimated capital project budget carry forwards. So I don't know if you're looking for carry forwards. I don't know why you'd go into grants and contingency fund. You got $10 million for new grants. Plus, and this the kicker in my estimation, you got, and this you put it in the budget in 2012 budget. You put $41,387,300 as a contingency. Now, I believe I know what a contingency is, and it explicitly says for unplanned operating and capital expenses. That's what we use contingencies for consistently, for unforeseen problems. So now how much is in that? How much is in that contingency fund or in the grants and contingency fund? Because you're pulling all this money out. Now it has a description there, and I don't think I have to read the description. I'd like to place this in the record so somebody could look at this here. So in my opinion, I'm saying that we do have a contingency fund, and we are drawing on the contingency fund. Where else is the money coming from? The only thing I can't find out is how much money we have in a contingency fund, which I think it's an individual fund, and where do we get the money from? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCarty, would you like to clarify any of that for Mr. Vukanovich?
Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair, members of the City Council. The contingency fund is merely an appropriation. It does not represent real money that the city has. And so that's been set up for exactly the points that were alluded to in Mr. Vukanovich's discussion, which is if the opportunity comes up for the city to receive access to a grant, then we have the appropriation authority to spend the money for that grant. And I think what's getting confused is that's not the case in this particular situation. So to clarify what we are doing, the bills for all of this work will be paid from the risk management fund. However, when we adopted that fund, that particular fund didn't have enough authority to make those expenditures. So we're taking the authority from the grants and contingency fund and just moving over what we need from an authority perspective, but the cash will come from the grants or the risk management fund. And that fund has about a $2 million balance, give or take, at the current time. So we're mixing appropriations with actual outflows of resources. So hopefully that clarifies the issue.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Thank you. Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Thank you. Next item is, again, these next three items are all part of the same presentation, and so I will look for a motion on this item.
Move to approve resolution number 2012-49, the contract with Clifton Larson Allen, LLP, for post-audit work relating to the assessment and collection of development impact fees.
Second.
There being a motion made and seconded, is there anyone that wishes to discuss this item from the audience? Mr. Ville, go right ahead.
I had my request in. Okay, so I understand that this is a grants and a contingency fund, and the contingency money, if I'm reading this right, what Scott said, it comes from the grants. Are we implying that we're getting grant money to hold audits? If we have grants in this fund, the grants have to be used for that specific purpose that we were given those grants for. You can't move the grants, unless I'm wrong, you can't move grants wherever you want to move them. You have to apply them to where we receive the grants. So I still, if the grants aren't furnishing this contingency money, where is this contingency money coming from? That's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bakanovich. And I believe that what Mr. McCarty explained, that this is about authorization and appropriation. And so we are doing that appropriately. We have authorized, we are appropriating. Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Thank you. Next item. Go ahead and read it.
Yes, this is for consideration and action on Resolution 2012-53, hiring 3 full-time temporary positions.
This is the third item of 4. I'm seeking an action on this item.
I move to approve Resolution 2012-53 to hire 1 full-time temporary fiscal support specialist in the Community and Economic Development Department and 2 senior financial analysts in the Finance Department to compensate current staff working during the post-audit work period.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
There being a motion made and seconded to approve resolution number 2012-53. Are there any questions from the audience?
I have a question.
Oh, Mr. Woodard first.
The 1 full-time temporary fiscal support for community and economic development. Can I get a little explanation on that one? I guess not.
Yeah,
He's coming forward.
He's on his way.
Jeff's coming down in the spirit of the conversation, but I'm going to let Jeff explain the impacts to his department.
Councilman Woodard, we're spending a lot of time helping Scott and his team, including the auditors, to go through all of the building permits. To do that, we have to dedicate staff to it, so we're just backfilling behind it to make sure that we're not getting behind on doing the other work, which is issuing building permits, setting up inspections, and so on.
Okay.
Councilman Woodard, as you might recall, in 1 year alone, we had over 7,000 building permits. So this is, when we talked about turning over rocks, we're not just turning over rocks, we're turning over pebbles and grains of sand. And it's a lot of work, and so we're trying to accommodate the needs of the departments to make sure that we get this work done in a very expedient way. Does that answer your question?
That answered the question,
Perfect.
yes.
Okay. Mr. Vukanovich, do you wish to ask a question?
I understand a lot more now when you say you're allocated that contingency fund, but when you say we don't have a contingency fund, then I'm completely lost. If we say we have a contingency fund and you've allocated so much money in the contingency fund, that's understandable. But when I'm told we don't have a contingency fund, but somehow we're drawing $500,000 out of contingency fund, that's what throws me. Now, on this item here, I couldn't understand. The financial department is going to have 2 employees, and they're going to get a total of $12,000 until the end of the fiscal year. 2 employees. They're going to be paid a total of $12,000. Now, Jeff is going to get 1 person for the same amount of time for $22,000. So I couldn't understand why 2 people are $12,000 and 1 person is $22,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to shed some light on that, Mr. McCarty?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the City Council. The answer to Mr. Vukanovich's question is the fact that the three people are going to be doing different work. It's going to take different amounts of time, and they're going to be compensated differently. So that's why it's not a per-person ratio that's the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, the clerk will take the roll.
Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Thank you. Next item.
Consideration and action on Resolution 2012-51, authorizing the city to enter into a professional agreement with Red Oak.
Mr. McCarty?
Just a brief statement here about how this relates to the first three. This particular agenda item is dealing with all of the remaining work related to updating the impact fee under the new state statute. If council will remember, we've done all the work we had to do to get things in place for the January 1, 2012 changes. What this is all the work that we have to have done in time for the August 1st, 2014 requirements. So this is a massive amount of work relative to compliance with the new state law. So I'm here, or Pat is here, to answer any additional questions you might have in terms of the context of the type of work that Red Oak will be working on.
Mr. McCarty, how often is there a state requirement for how often one would engage in a new impact fee study?
Madam Chair, members of the City Council, common practice is probably anywhere from 2 to 3 years, and again, it's going to depend on where you are in the growth continuum, how many new projects you have, how many new people or new businesses are coming into the city. But I want to emphasize this is being necessitated by the change in the new state law, so it's a significant amount of analysis, redoing the master plans, et cetera, et cetera. Very complicated, very long process. It's going to take the better part of 2 years to
And when was the last
complete.
time we performed a study for impact fees?
Our last impact fees changed 2007.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was changed in 2007, so the study was done in about 2006. So as you can imagine, the assumptions and just the view of the world has changed in those 6 years. And so for in a lot of intents and purposes, we're going to be starting over in terms of doing this work.
In fact, in common practice is 2 to 3 years. We would have to do this anyway, but because of the state law changes, that makes it even more complex and more necessary to do this now.
Correct. And the other thing that I should have pointed out in my comments is that the impact fees themselves actually pay for the study to be updated and redone in this case. So I want to make sure that gets pointed out as well.
Good point. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Scott, what was the original contract with Heinfield and Meach?
The original contract back in March of 2011 was round numbers $185,000.
185, okay, and there's 130 left.
Correct.
Balance in that. Okay, then now we're going into a contract with Red Oak for 285. So we're saying that the whole, I mean, help me out with the arithmetic here. What's the total cost of doing this? If we started with 185 with Meach, we spent 55.
Right.
And then now we're spending another 285. So it's 360. 340? 340 total.
Correct. Let me walk you through the components of that.
Okay.
And the first thing to remember is when we signed the contract with Heinfield Meach back in 2011, literally the new state law wasn't even in effect. In other words, it hadn't been passed.
Okay.
So parts of that contract and the actual amount of work were unknown. In other words, it has seriously expanded the scope and the amount of work since the new state law was approved. The other piece to that that's important to remember is the amount of work that we had to do to get to the January 1 effective date of 2012 for some of those pieces was significantly more than we anticipated. Okay. When we adopted that original contract. A lot of that, there was really two reasons for that. One was the ambiguity about the state law there was some sub-consulting fees that Pat had to engage on to help clarify what the new laws were that were effective January 1, 2012. And then the other thing that added to that is, quite honestly, our circumstances. We had some unique circumstances that Pat had to spend a lot of time making sure that we had to, get in line for January 12th.
So the original contract we entered into without full vetting or without full
Correct.
knowledge of the impact.
And so and then the other point I want to emphasize in terms of getting to the aggregate 340 that you alluded to that is correct has to do with what we learned from getting ready for the January 1 effective 12 is there's a lot of ambiguity in there, and we're going to have to go through that process again. And then, quite honestly, the second thing relative to city-specific facts is we foresee that to be a very complicated process, especially coming off the heels of what they're going to be doing in the post-audit work. So, yes, it's a lot of money, but it really goes to the complexity of what they're going to be doing for us.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions on this item? Seeing none, I'm seeking a motion.
I move to approve resolution number 2012-51, authorizing the city to enter into a professional services agreement with Red Oak Consulting and Arcadis Group for a development impact fee study in an amount not to exceed $284,436.
Second.
There being a motion made and seconded, are there any further questions? Is there anyone from the audience who wishes to speak up on this item?
I was trying to understand this here, this $130,000. If you need $285,000, I would think that then you'd have $130,000 plus 100 and whatever the balance. But you're taking out and even this is not clear. I believe the motion is for $284,000, right? But it says in here that you're asking for $285,000. That comes out of that Exhibit A, $285,000. But in reality, it doesn't. You're asking for $284, $285, but you're taking out of grants of contingency fund $289,000. So I didn't understand the extra $4,000 or $5,000. Where is that coming from? And I still don't understand. I'm just like Councilman Hall. I mean, if you need $285,000 and you have $130,000, so you got another $155,000, it makes you got the contract price. What happened to this $130,000? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCarty, would you like to clarify that point?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the City Council. Mr. Vrgonovich is correct. The contract itself is roughly $285,000. The budget authority, again, across all the funds, there's 11 different funds, aggregates about $289,000. So it is an increment of $5,000. The rationale for that is when we budget to the nearest hundredth dollar. And so when you take that times 12 and all the amount of funds and how we allocated it across all the funds, it basically just rounds itself again to a higher number. But again, that's a budget authority number as opposed to what you're approving with the contract is the $284,436. So hopefully that clarifies the relationship between those numbers.
Councilman Hall.
I just have a comment, Scott. It's just amazing when you think of our state legislature mandating this and what it's costing all the cities in the state of Arizona for an unfunded mandate. It's just amazing. This is a cost they just put on us as a local government. And how many cities we got in Arizona? 91? Everybody's going through this, right?
Yeah, correct. I mean, if you have an impact fee program, you have to be compliant January 1 to 12, and then further compliance August 1st, 2014.
It really is something. Anyway, that's just my comment.
And that's just the cost to be compliant, taking no consideration into the restrictions on the impact fees.
Yep. Thank you for your comments. Thank you, Mr. McCarty. Seeing no further questions, the clerk will take the roll.
Need Councilmember Alton, please. Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Thank you.
The next item, consideration and discussion of the Council Policies and Procedures Committee regarding regional boards and commissions and possible action to appoint council members to regional boards and commissions.
Mr. Bailey.
Actually, Mayor and Council, I'll defer to the head of the committee, Councilmember Woodard.
Thank you. Mr. Woodard.
The committee consisting of Councilman Biondo and Alton and myself, and with the assistance of Mr. Bailey, we have been meeting and working on our council policies and procedures. We are to the point where I believe at our next work session we will be presenting to you for review and discussion the policies, not the procedures at this point. We're actually breaking down into policies and then procedures. And those policies, working with Mr. Bailey, to make sure that they agree with and are in adherence with both city code and state law. And so if all goes well, we'll have that for you next week, and then once that goes through and is approved, then we'll move on to the procedures. One of the things we're going to do differently than the last time, we're going to have them in a 3-ring binder so that if we make a change in a policy or a procedure, we don't have to throw out the whole book. We can just throw out the page. And with that in mind, there was discussion that our current policies and procedures, basically policies, allows for the council to appoint the representative to sit on various regional commissions. And at our last meeting as a nominating committee, we elected to look at and consider the Maricopa Association of Governments, the Regional Council of the Valley Metro Regional Public Transportation Authority, and we would move to approve Sharon Wolcott, the mayor of Surprise, to serve on those commissions and boards.
Second.
So that is a motion?
That's a motion.
That is a motion, and it is seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Councilman Biondo.
I'd just like to quickly note the distinction between this process and then the other process that's occurring. This is part of, as Councilmember Woodard indicated, this is part of the overall review of the policies and procedures, which is separate from the overall comprehensive review of boards and commissions. This deals specifically with the regional appointments. The other deals with the City of Surprise local boards and commissions appointments.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Are there any other comments, questions? Is there anyone from the audience who would like to step forward on this item? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Thank you. And I personally would like to thank you, Councilman Woodard, and all of the members of your subcommittee for the work that you're working on to try to clarify and pull apart the council policies and procedures manual. I know that was a particularly top priority item for you, in particular, Councilman Woodard. And so you're doing tremendous work trying to get through all of this to make sure that we are indeed consistent with city code, and also with the city manager's policy, which is, I think, really, really important that we're consistent. Our own policies here at the council table should be consistent with the city manager's policies as well. So thank you very much for all the work that all of you are doing on that item, and thank you for making these appointments official. I appreciate it. Next item.
Consideration and action on the Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan 2012-2013.
Ms. Ramirez, welcome.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the council. We come before you today presenting the final draft of the Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan, and also to hold a public hearing to garner citizen input regarding the public service funding recommendations as well as the annual action plan funding recommendations. Just a little bit of background on the Community Development Block Grant Program. The city does receive money directly from the Department of U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and it is estimated that the funding year of 2012-2013 we should receive approximately $449,087, which is a significant increase from previous years due to changes in population that have been noted in the latest census. Of that funding, we can set aside 15% that can be used for public services, so that would be right around $67,000 that could be allocated. Just as a reminder, aside from meeting a national objective with this funding, we also have to determine who the beneficiary of this funding is going to be, either an applicant or family that is at or below 80% of median income, or we would have to benefit an area within Surprise where 51% of the residents meet the 80% below or at or below median income, or a limited clientele, which is a group of individuals that by and large would meet this qualification, such as seniors, homeless, adults with disabilities. After going through this process, having a series of public hearings and public meetings, the Quality of Life Commission did make recommendations dealing with the public service funding, where they are recommending funding to go to St. Mary's Food Bank, Salvation Army, Civitan, and Arizona Charter Academy. Aside from this, what we are proposing through the annual action plan is continuing our citywide housing rehabilitation program. So this is a program where any individual family anywhere within Surprise could apply and receive benefits as long as they meet the eligibility criteria. Funding, as noted, the public service applicants, and then allowing a portion to be set aside for administrative reimbursement for the implementation of this program. We also have a small rollover of funding from previous years that was left over from projects that were completed under CDBG for a total allocation of $544,999 for the year. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Are there questions, members?
Yes.
Councilman Villanueva.
On the rollover, $95,000, why was that? You didn't have the applicants, or you just couldn't move the money?
Well, generally what it is if we receive an allocation for the year and we then complete a project, the project can come in at a lower bid than anticipated, and so we would have the leftover money and then we roll it over to a future project. But all of the previous goals that we had set have been met in terms of the projects that we were going to do. We actually did them. This was all just the leftover money from one year to the next that can be used and allocated as long as it qualifies for a project.
Thank you.
Councilman Biondo.
Christina, I think we've talked about this a little bit before. Is there a specific way to solicit applicants? I'm obviously thinking in terms of some of those needs in Section 10, and you've been so gracious about being up there and helping us with that process. But there obviously are some needs up there as well, but yet I'm not sure that anyone's applying from that area. So I don't know how to encourage that.
Well, I can assure the council that we have received applications from people throughout the city, and so there have been good representation from different neighborhoods. Generally, we have received quite a few applications, either through outreach that we have done through our Pride Days, where we do a cleanup, and then we further receive an application because they have a greater need than we're able to accommodate that day. We've received referrals from our code enforcement division, where they see a need, and so they bring in whatever resource they can possibly offer to the resident. We also do quite a bit of outreach at neighborhood meetings, on the website, in the mailers, in the progress news releases. So we do try to garner as much information as we can from the residents. But I can assure you that we generally have a waiting list.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I'll look for an action.
Move to approve the Community Development Block Grant Action Plan 2012-13.
Second.
A motion being made and seconded to approve the Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan for 2012 and 13. Is there anyone from the audience who wishes to speak up on this item?
Actually, Mayor, just a point of order. This requires an open public hearing, so I would need you to actually take the formal step of opening the floor for the public hearing and then closing it. If you do so, I'd appreciate it.
I will open the public hearing portion of this action item. Is there anyone who wishes to step forward on this item and speak on this item? Seeing none? Are you sure? Okay. Okay, just checking. Okay. Then the public hearing portion will be closed. And are there any other questions? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is call to the public. At this time, is there anyone that has signed up to speak to us this evening?
Yes, we have Leah Bowers. I hope I didn't say your name incorrectly.
Ms. Bowers, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Leah Bowers, and I'm the Middle Years Coordinator and the Gifted Coordinator at Cardin Traditional School. I'm here tonight to give some updates on the second phase of the building of our school. And I have my notes from our facilities manager, so I don't mess anything up. I'm also here to just continue the invitation for our groundbreaking tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. at our campus on Acoma, 15688 West Acoma. We're very excited. So having said that, let me read specifically so you get everything directly from our facilities manager. As of April 10th, today, we have been slab poured on the gymnasium. All of the buildings, including our future culinary building, have completed stem walls and should have slabs poured within the coming days. Underground plumbing on buildings 100 and 200 should be completed by April the 12th. This is very important due to the fact that these buildings house our restrooms. I'm surprised he didn't put a little ha-ha behind that, but okay. We are scheduled to begin vertical construction on April 16th, 2012, beginning with the gymnasium wall. So we are hoping the building slab shells are complete. With a scheduled start of August 13th for our 2012 school year, D.L. Withers has scheduled completion of our classrooms, admin, gymnasiums, buildings no later than August the 1st. We are currently ahead of schedule, but are still planning on the August 1st. So just an update, and again, an invitation, and thank you so much. We're very excited about the phase 2.
Thank you so much for your update. Appreciate that. Is there anyone else?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. The next item is future agenda items. Is there anyone from the council that wishes to discuss future agenda items? Seeing none, I have a couple of items that I'd like to bring to your attention. One is I had a really great lunch with David Moss from the Chamber of Commerce this week, and we were talking about the chamber contract. And given what we're dealing with the budget, I think it's appropriate that we bring to a future council workshop item for discussion the chamber contract, because I think we're all in agreement that perhaps we should relook at that particularly given that there are 2 years left on the contract, but in fact, we might need to make some adjustments on that particular item. And the other thing is that I did send you an email, and I know that Mr. Celaya also sent you an email about the action that was taken by the Supreme Court in regards to the issue of elections in the city of Tucson. And speaking of local control issues, it was considered a major, I guess, victory for local communities when the Supreme Court stepped forward and said that the city can control its own destiny and its own elections. And so that being said, this morning at the West Valley Mayors and Managers meeting, the head of the League of Cities was also talking about charter cities and the value of charter cities for controlling, holding on to some controls at the local level. And so I had thought it would be a good thing for us to bring forward to at least discuss to see if you wish to include that as a budget item and budget for this coming year, or if it's something that you want to put off into the future. But nevertheless, it should be a discussion, I think, at a workshop item if you agree.
Yeah.
So that being said, that's what I have for future agenda items. Does anybody else have anything else they want to add?
I have one, Madam Mayor. I would like, and I talked to Chris about this earlier, I would like some kind of a energy plan presentation. I mean, we spend a lot of money on energy in our city, with this city hall, with the tech accelerator, with all the fire stations, with the library, and I would like to know what we're doing to mitigate energy expenses. Besides the solar application, there's other things. What are we doing? And
okay.
to have a workshop.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay. Anyone else?
Yes.
Councilman Woodard.
Future agenda? No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Are there any other items? Okay. That being said, we're going to go with council reports. I will start with Councilman Hall.
You know what? I'm going to pass, Madam Mayor. I've been busy the last couple of weeks, but I really don't want to talk about all of it. It's boring. A lot of it's just boring stuff. Anyway, okay. But I did go to the Relay for Life. That was not boring.
Okay.
And my compatriot here won an award out of 17 contestants. He won the award for the best dressed lady as a man. It was great.
You're going to go work in New Orleans?
And Ken Lynch got some great pictures. I was hoping he could provide some pictures for us. But anyway.
Miss Marigold.
Councilman Woodard.
Thank you. Yes, and I am proud because the council, we raised through this process of the contest, it was 63 that night, but I've gotten another 20, so $383 for Relay for Life. It was a really wonderful experience, somewhat embarrassing at times, but it was one of those things that you'll have for the rest of your life. And thank goodness my life is going to be shorter than some people's. But I did enjoy it, and it was fun. I will never do it again. Next year, Skip's going to. He promised.
What you really mean by that is you will never dress up like a woman again.
That's what I mean.
You'll still be walking around that track.
Oh, I will still be walking around that track. I walked around that track for 12 hours, and believe me, I will do that because it'll take me a year to recover. Also, I want to mention, or I could let John do it, but we could, this Saturday, we have our council coffee. It's here at City Hall in the council public room, parked in the north, out by the courthouse here on the north side. Follow the signs, come on in. We'll be there from 9 to usually 11 or 11:30. And I'm sure that John looks forward to it as much as I do.
Councilman Williams.
I do, Mike. Thank you. Just want to congratulate and thank the CRS staff again. I was at the Extravaganza. According to Mr. Coronado, 11,000 on the clicker. 11,000 people at the Extravaganza. It was the staff did a magnificent job. It was definitely organized chaos, but the kids had fun. So, and my son's a little brutal, knocking kids over, picking up eggs. But we'll talk about that later. April 21st, Be Green, Be Healthy, and there's signs posted around City Hall. And then May 11th is our Teen Leadership Summit, and I presented that to Council, and the Council has adopted that, and that'll be right here in the Council chambers in conjunction with the community university. We have some good facilitators coming out of ASU, so it should be a good event. And then May 12th, the next day, is our citywide cleanup of foreclosures. It's interesting the feedback that I've gotten in terms of community managers wanting to continue to do this. So hopefully this is not an event that continues on and that these issues go away. But on Monday at Jim's Burgers and Eggs at 6:30 p.m., we will meet with a lot of community members that want to participate and make donations. And it's a community event. It's not a city initiative. It's a community initiative. So we look forward to that. So anybody else that wants to participate, Monday, 6:30 p.m., Jim's Burgers and Eggs. And the corner of Cotton Lane and Greenway.
Thank you. Councilman Alton.
My stuff was boring as well. I'll pass.
Councilman Villanueva.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Public Works for finishing the sidewalks there on Greenway and Grand Avenue. And also attended the art show both days and talked to some of the vendors. They were very happy, especially for being the first time. And the only complaint that I heard was the advertisement. So they were looking forward to having a little better advertisement. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Yeah. Councilman Biondo.
Just one thing that three of us attended that really wasn't too boring. That was the Dysart Schools Educational Technology Site Tour. It was really nice recognition for Dysart Schools to recognize them by the National Association of School Boards for integrating technology throughout the classrooms. So it was a great tour and nice recognition for Dysart.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you for bringing that up. I've been to a lot of not so boring things to me, but a lot of boring things, but I won't belabor the full agenda of things that I've been doing for the last couple of weeks, but I did want to specifically say that I attended a town hall meeting hosted by Councilman Hall, and I thought it was well attended. And it was a tremendous presentation by our city staff about our financial challenges. I thought they did an excellent job. I thought the audience was great. They were full of terrific questions. And it was a really great experience, I think, just engaging with the community, a great experience for our city manager and for our CFO to just get out there and get one-on-one with the folks in the city. And so I certainly encourage any one of us to go ahead and set up that kind of an environment for the city staff. They are standing at the ready anytime to come out to your district and have that same conversation. I know that Councilman Biondo and Alton are working with the staff at Sun City Grand to hold a town hall meeting in Sun City Grand. Today I attended Councilman Biondo's Arizona Traditions coffee, which was very well attended. Yeah. And again, a wonderful group of people who are full of great questions. And also the coffee between Councilman Biondo and Alton last week. I was at least able to step in for a few minutes before I headed out of town. But it's really great to see everybody reaching out and trying to engage the citizens of Surprise in whatever way they can. And I want to thank all of you for doing that. And I also want to thank our staff, Stephanie and Nicole, for facilitating all of that, because that's really made a big difference too. So thank you for all of that. And we now have an executive session And so I will entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session. I do not believe that we will be coming back and taking any action. This is simply an informational update.
Correct.
I'll take a motion.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded, and we are adjourned.
These work sessions, the council